Well, thank you so much for coming. This is a wonderful crowd. So it's been such a privilege for us to present Kennedy's exhibition. We're thrilled. It's one of the strongest exhibitions we've ever had in the gallery. And, and it's also a privilege to have Alteronce here to be in dialogue, also one of the outstanding artists of his generation. And so this is historic to have the two of you here, and I'll let you start. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Jeffrey Deitch. Thank you, Jeffrey, for that spirited introduction. Thank you, Kennedy, for making this amazing work, for sharing your ideas, your spirit, your creativity, your sense of being manifested into these objects that we can see and experience and to think about, to talk about, which brought everyone here to this moment in time, to this room. And it's a very beautiful room, and I'd like to just thank you right off the top for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. Alteronce, my dear friend. Every time I see Alteronce, we are cackling, just having a great time, talking about life, talking about art, talking about love, and whatever bullshit's going on. So I thought it would be like a perfect combination of an artist who's carrying on the same legacy of me of abstract expressionism. Yeah, today we wanted to get together and just talk a little bit about the show and about our practices. And I want to thank all of you beautiful people for coming out and sharing this time and this space with us. So
yeah, I'd like to start just to get the room familiar with us. I was trying to recall when we first met.
We have a picture. There is a picture of Alteronce.
There is a picture.
There's a picture of Alteronce.
Legendary picture. I was definitely in the haze that evening.
It was at Derek Adams. And Derek Adams had just made a really huge mural for Swiss Beats for something.
Yes. I was trying to. What was the name of that club in Soho? It was somewhere.
But it was it was a really big piece for Derek, and he was really excited about that. And Derek was someone who put me on in art. Derek curated me into one of my first art shows in a proper gallery with Devin and Morris.
Okay, yeah.
And at Karen Jenkins Johnson. So
I remember that show.
Yeah.
I remember that show. That was great. Yeah. Well, ever since then, we've been in dialogue and conversation.
Comrades.
Yes, and here we are in your solo exhibition, and you describe this exhibition as your return to painting. Can you talk to us about that?
So, I've been a painter my whole life since I was a little girl, and always working with brushes, always working in abstraction, and typically working as an action painter. So a lot of my work, I would always do it aerially. I'd be standing above the canvases, be moving them around like that, putting them back on the wall, moving them around and back and forth like that. So it was always very much in the moment. It was immediate, it was momentous, and it would be captured in the canvases in that way. It had a sense of motion to it. And, I was painting on canvas, and then in 2010, I did a show called Wu Wei, which means to allow in Chinese. I have a background in Qigong, which is energy work, so I'm very often speaking about the Tao, the way of things. Taoism is basically about the way that things are and surrendering to the way of the world and the way of the universe. And in that show, I was pouring onto canvases, and the paint we're getting these beautiful kind of fractal-like details from the way it would interact with itself. And when I did the opening of that show, I thought, oh wow, I would love to take paint off of the canvas. I wonder what that would be like. And I thought about it for about a year, and then I started making the paint skins. So the material that you guys all see here is a paint skin, and it's basically hundreds of gallons of paint that is dried and then manipulated and sculpted. So I'm pouring large bodies of paint, and when it dries, I lift it up and then I sculpt it. And over time, it hardens, so it really takes on a structural body form to it. The way that I think of the paint skins, I continue to think of them as paint, as an extension of my brush, and I'm using them in the same way that I would for the marking or a thoughtful continuation of the composition and the gesture of the work. But actually painting, picking up my brush, working in that way, when I first started this show, I found this huge water barrel. It was 20 feet long and 10 feet tall. It was this beautiful chrome color. And typically when I'm working in the metal yard, I am crushing the metal with the large machines that are there. You know, they look like a big dinosaur and they kind of bite it and crunch it and make it all crinkly and beautiful. This was a stainless steel, so it's very thick and it's a material that I hadn't really worked with before. And so I was somewhat forced into finding a different way to break it down. So all of the pieces were fire cut. And I was thinking about, I spent the summer doing some color studies and a lot of like European masters, and I saw the Matisse pieces at the Byler Foundation. And I didn't know that Matisse was working with paper. I thought he was always painting, and he had these incredible paper cutouts, and they kind of reminded me of the paper cutout. It's a different composition for the way that I normally work because of the challenges and the obstacles of how to break this material down. But it had this kind of more childlike hand to it. And so that was a part of it, but the painting aspect of it, I'd say a great word to use when I was entering into painting with my brush again was restraint. I first painted the thing as a large piece and broke it up in my mind in a couple of pieces, but a lot of the deterioration of the pieces and like a lot of the markings that you'll see on it will happen actually within the breaking down of it. So I really was very simple about how I used my brush and the colors that I brought in, and tried to make space for the rest of it to kind of show me the way within its detailing. So that's been my entrance into it. But I was using, because it was so big, I was using like brushes to paint, like big like sweeping brushes for the floor. I was using like mops and the paint rollers and.
And are these acrylic or oil?
The base is acrylic, and a lot of the finishing is oil. So the first layer of painting, the first painting was all this really muted color. And then when I went back and I was highlighting and low lighting, I was bringing in the acrylics. I was bringing using the sticks a lot. Yeah.
And just I guess the technical process with the skins, you said you use hundreds of gallons. Are they heavy? Is it a heavy material that you're manipulating?
Yeah, it's a wrestling. It's a whole performance. It's I don't know. Is Jewel's here? Jewel's back there. Is Sarah here with you? Sarah and Jewel are two of my studio assistants that I work with. And
shout out to the assistants.
What's up, guys? Raise your hand. And Julia is also here, my studio manager. And these are the people who make this world go around, humming on life.
And I know you talked about the metal a little bit, but I love that relationship to Matisse cutouts. Could you talk to us a little bit more about how the forms of the metal kind of took place?
Yeah, well, so much of my practice is really conductive, like using myself as a conduit to make space for the work. And as I moved into sculpture, as I've moved into the 3D, that's really what has encapsulated my mind, is like, how do I create the environment around these things? And in making them, it's a process of kind of listening and just seeing what's available to me, like what shapes make sense. Because when I'm cutting it out of the thing, I don't really get to see it until it's in the studio. I'm doing it, but you don't see anything. You can't really tell. Do you have that with your work at all?
For sure, yeah. The process is so layered, and half the time it's tabled. So the first time I actually see and experience the work is when it's actually up and on the wall, kind of the same way you see it when it's in your studio. And I get to see you out there in the junkyard, or just welding this material, cutting it up. There's so much going around you. There's so much noise. There's so much static that it's not until you kind of get into that safe space of the studio where you actually do the real mental and physical work of actually making this thing, manifest itself.
Can you tell everyone a little bit more about your work so they kind of have an idea of how it works?
This is your talk.
No, 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 no. No, no, no. It's artist stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm also an abstract painter. I do feel like I'm carrying the torch of abstract expressionism. For maybe it's in like its fifth generation, but who's counting? And but I mostly am thinking about ways in which abstraction can redefine color for myself. So I'm bringing together. I'm very much working I describe my work as paintings, but I'm using alternative materials like glass and gemstones and resin to conjure this experience of color that we kind of see in nature or even think about in our psychological state. And so, yeah, my work is kind of just, doing a deep dive into the experience of color and kind of approaching it from a cosmic perspective in a sense.
And you're using glass now. Are you finding that glass? How are you?
I used to find the glass. I used to salvage it from this shop in Chinatown. It was a glass shop. It was like a mom and pop shop, and I would buy all of the glass that was being discouraged from or discarded that was like tagged on. That if someone would like tag on someone's like glass door, then they would replace the door. So I would go and buy that because I felt like it already had this nice texture to it. But now I'm actually buying sheets of glass because I kind of need more than they can give me. So it became like a supply thing.
Well, it's interesting because I think, when I first started going to the metal yards, I was very dependent on whatever I could get from the bottom of the pile, whatever I could either pick up with me and Jewel or whatever I could, each thing that had a color. So there was a lot of dependency on kind of what was there. Like, you find the graffiti.
Yeah.
And, the Brooklyn Museum installation, No More Drama that I did, and this show, No More Drama was kind of the precursor of figuring out how to paint on a larger scale thing and break it up. This is one of my first bodies of metal work where I've really had much more agency and direction in the colors and all the things that are happening within the work than I had before.
Yeah, could you speak about that within the process? What changed for you?
A lot. First of all, I took a lot of time to do this work. I spent a year working on this project, and that was such a luxury and such a incredible thing to just really get to let each piece and let the metal just show itself to me, let things kind of like resonate in a slower way, and really be able to take time. So that was a big thing for me that was a little bit different. But it's interesting because I'm typically working with this algorithm of paint, skin, and metal. It's these two materials, and then they manifest in all these different ways. And I feel like for this one, I was approaching something where I had to enter into the piece and then and paint it, and I didn't really know how I was gonna, like each thing that I did, I never really knew how it was gonna happen. I didn't know how to cut the steel. I didn't know I was gonna make it into 10 pieces. I didn't know if it was gonna be hanging from this. I didn't know what was gonna happen. So definitely calling upon my ability to submit to the material. And also with the paint skins, I was building a lot of structures underneath them so that they have a little bit more opportunity to articulate themselves in a much bigger and expressionistic way. And yeah, I mean, these are big works. They're just figuring out how to move them back and forth and up and down. And in the studio, we're kind of like figuring out all those different nuances of how to do that. But
I mean, you always seem to be working with this found material, this found metal. Have you ever thought about working with forgery, or is there something special and specific about finding the material in the junkyard that kind of draws you to that space and process?
Well, I think for me, even in my painting practice, when I was working with just the paint skins by themselves, I was responding to the skin. I was responding to this thing that's in front of me, and I just think, maybe in my mind even, I like the hunt. I love going out in the yard, and it really satisfies a part of me, a part of that action painter, a part of that momentous kind of like, what's the word, adrenaline, sick thing that I have where I need to be in these places where I'm like, where I have to hone in on something. I got to find myself in a place where I'm like, I got to lock in. And that provided that for me.
I feel like often, especially within my practice, when I'm working on a painting, I'm searching for something. And I don't know what that is necessarily. I may just have like this inkling of maybe a painting I saw or something that, maybe I thought about in a dream that, oh, this cool effect that might happen or this imagery. And I think that searching is also a part of like the intellectual or psychological work that goes into making art. Can you speak to us a little bit about the intellectual labor that you put into this beautiful body of work? Like, who are you reading? Who are you talking to? What was what was the research like?
Um, Well, a lot of it has actually kind of poured over from other shows that I've done. So I did a show called Moving Weight in combination with a work from Hilma Ofklint, who is technically the mother of abstraction. And I don't know if you guys know about Hilma's work, but she was an incredible artist who channeled hundreds of paintings from a consciousness. And so she was really using and submitting her body to the ability to receive this information, but also to execute on it. And I'm reading her mentor, Rudolf Steiner, who was an incredible theosophist and researcher. He started the Waldorf schools in education, biodynamic science. He's an incredible mind and an eyewitness to the occult. So a lot of the things that I'm looking at in my work is typically falling into some place of the invisible plane. I'm very interested in how my body and how my mind connect, and then how they process and receive and excavate information. And with this show, while I was working on the barrel when it was in its full state, there was water that was inside, and I was talking about consciousness, something that we cannot hold our hand on, something that we cannot name exactly. I thought that water would be an incredible example for people to have a better understanding of something that's really in all of us and flowing through all of us. So I was really thinking about water within the hum, water within like the collective existence, the water in my body and the water in the ocean, and how I'm in conversation with it, because that material is something that's imprinted on the surface. Water actually takes in all of its information, everything it passes through. And we've been talking about Jack Whitten a lot. And Jack talks about the phenomena of surface, and he's one of the few artists that I've really heard kind of investigate that for themselves. But there's this idea that I carry in my work of transmutation from thought to thing, from mind to object. And these things are all really thought forms for me. So I'm spending a lot of time with people from like researching Anne Besant, all these people from the turn of the century, around like the same time were the masters of like Kandinsky and Matisse, and when abstraction was really beginning, and when there was a very large movement of spiritualism universally in the world, and that was like a big topic of conversation. So I'm spending a lot of time reading Rudolf Steiner, thinking about water, there's another person named Dr. Bruce Lipton, who I like to reference a lot, who talks about the study of epigenetics and how we have the power within our mind to transform our DNA. And what does that look like in going into this work? So for me, Humming on Life is about it's about the spiritual technology. It's about the vibration that happens within the atom. So I have an ontological commitment to atomism, which means that whenever I'm talking, I'm coming from the foundation of thinking about what is actually creating and vibrating within matter of each of us and all things. And within that, I'm very interested in the fact that there is no such thing as silence, that there's always a vibration, there's always a movement, there's always part of this existence. And you can see these dualities in my work, but I'm really interested in that harmonious moment when things come together, and how they come together and how they coalesce, and what makes that unity so right, you know.
No, that was beautiful. Yeah, definitely a huge fan of Jack Whitten. I think between the three of us, we're all very much materialists within that respect. And I love you talking about consciousness and water. And I was wondering, I was here for the walkthrough where you kind of walked us through the show. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the titles of some of the works. I know some of them were dedicated to certain individuals. Some of them carry very personal references to things that may have happened in your life, people who are in your circle. And so I just wonder if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, typically, when I'm building a show, I'm really building the full show. I'm not always thinking specifically about the individual pieces and like dedicating a full thing to each piece. I'm building the whole thing at once. So I'm doing all the same research at once. And then I go back and I name them and I think about what they evoke for me and how they feel and what they're really about. And one of the pieces that I think you're referring to is the larger purple piece up there, which is called An Ode to Hugs. And it is an ode to an artist named Hugo MacLeod, who is an incredible materialist. And those are the artists that I really, really care about and I'm really interested in. I love art, but I might not love art the way that everyone else does. I love artists. And I love artists who are really challenging their materials, their presentation, the execution, and then continuing to articulate that. That's what I'm really interested in. And Hugo is someone who lives from labor, and he was a mentor of mine, and I admire him so much. And it was interesting within our relationship, I had to recognize that I was a very different artist than him because I wanted to emulate him. I wanted to be like him, but I don't really work like that. I have a very different way of working. And he has a series of metal work where there's often these seams in his work because he's using the tar ceilings or the tar from the roofing. So there's always these seams in his work, and that piece wouldn't fit in the elevator in the building. I actually ended up just cutting the bottom. I was like, oh, the seam, we'll do a Hugo seam. So we cut the bottom of it off and got it through the door. But that one is called An Ode to Hugs. Yeah.
Shout out to Hugo. So speaking about life, what else is going on with you? Anything coming up, anything in progress or down the road that you could speak about?
Well, it's such an interesting time right now. I've done 10 shows, 10 solo shows since 2017. And I have, I'm just kind of, I'm coming down. I've been in New York for 14 years, and I hustled my ass off to be able to sit in front of you guys today and to make this work, to be able to move these things from side to side. And in order to do that, I really found myself in a place where I, mushrooms, weed, and wine, like whatever is gonna get me through it. Like we're trying to make this happen. So I'm excited to kind of go back to a place where I'm spending more time doing more physical austerities, getting back into my spiritual practice. When I talk about spiritual technology, what I'm talking about is the body's ability to be a conduit to information. So I'm doing a lot of breath work. And I'm fascinated by the ability that I can literally find out information from my ancestors, from my own life, by breathing in a certain way, in a very specific way, and it evokes such incredible things. And so I'm really excited to spend more time working with people who are expanding on the dialogue of that. I'm interested in building larger archives and research centers where people are. Where I'm bringing people in who are really writing about science and physics and biology and relating that into art. When I think about the abstract expressionists, I think about a people who had to work very, very hard intellectually to define a genre of work. And and yes, we are in the fifth generation. We are in the fifth iteration of it. But I think in this moment in time when, we're looking at our biographies in a different way. We're looking at our relationship as artists to the world in a different way. I think there's an entire dialogue to dig into on like what on how there's a language behind how my mind is creating these things now, and I'm interested in digging into that language. I can't write it, I don't know it, but I'm seeking out the people who are doing that right now, and I'm really excited about that. Um, yeah, so that's kind of where my head's at right now, just kind of coming down and tapping back into myself, tapping back into my body, just feeling myself again, and hopefully that will express itself into some really monumental sculptures.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I could totally relate. I think I recently did ayahuasca.
You did it?
Yeah,
Where?
deep dive. Costa Rica.
Okay.
Um, yeah, we can talk about that later.
No, talk about it. Let's go.
I mean, it was like I would describe it as like a beautiful cleanse, and I feel like it's often as artists, we're definitely bringing our own personal histories into it. We're trying to navigate an art world that, isn't really, there's no clear path laid out for us. It's not like we apply for an exhibition at a gallery and then they review it. It's kind of like we have to hustle. We have to work a certain way, and we're also dealing with, we're using our work to also cleanse ourselves of some of these things, but also evolve as human beings at the same time. And so, I feel like everyone as human beings is carrying around this emotional and mental trauma with us. So the plant medicine is kind of there to help, surrender. You mentioned the word surrender to whatever it is that was holding you back from moving forward. And I think that that type of work is something that we all should be trying to do. I think we are, hopefully everyone is maybe has a therapist is kind of doing that kind of mental counseling. But sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of plant medicine to help take you to a deeper state of consciousness that you probably wouldn't have be able to get to just with regular meditation. I've been hearing about breath work also being a part of that
The
as
breath
well.
work is incredible. The breath work is incredible because it's just, well, first of all, isn't it amazing that we can take something from the ground and put it in our mouth and be connected to the entire world around us?
Yeah.
And that by itself. But the fact that we can do it from our breath,
Yeah.
the same process, the same work, just from what's already available to us is so fascinating to me. And I'm interested in continuing to further that. But this work, like the labor and the repetition of working for me in my life, as a biracial woman, as an artist, as all the things that whatever I encapsulate each day that changes, like these are the things that allow me to process my trauma and my joy and my interests and my curiosities. And it's the actual time where I'm working that those things can come through me. And what I think is the beautiful thing about art is it allows you to activate yourself as the conduit. It allows you to let things happen to you and come through you. And the installation that I have called No More Drama at the Brooklyn Museum is really about that. It was my desire to be able to expand beyond my circumstances, to actively expand beyond something that otherwise would probably hold me down or keep me here or keep me there. Can I be bigger than it? Can I move beyond it? How do I make my energy move around it? How do I make my mind beyond it? How do I get my ego, that big ass ego? How do I move beyond that? So, that's been really a practice that I've been trying to channel within the work, is like removing myself in a way, but allowing myself to expand beyond my expectations.
That's beautiful, and I think it's great that as an artist, you have the ability to do that on a day-to-day basis. I feel like one of the interesting things that I found about being an artist is that I'm perpetually taking risk in my studio and putting myself in like a sketchy or like, fearful situation that I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work out, but I'm going to do it anyway. It seemed like a cool idea, but that there's a safe space where I could take those risks daily, that most people can't take at their 9 to 5s. Like you can't fuck up somebody's account if you're a day trader. Um, but I think that that's one of the privileges we have as an artist and as creative beings, that we can expand and take those risks and go out of our comfort zone to discover another side or perspective of ourselves and the world around us. And it's a very beautiful thing.
It's really within the obstacles. It's within like the challenges every single day, and especially working in sculpture, it's just like one logistical problem after another, and trying to figure out what's next. And also on top of that, it's like, how do I become this thing that can kind of just be responding to it? And it doesn't even become. I don't really believe in failure as a thing. I mean, it's like, if we're talking about the Tao, if we're talking about the polarities of existence, like one cannot be without the other. You cannot be without evil and good. And I think that like I'm trying to train myself to continue to be able to recognize that immediately within myself, that it's like, it's not an obstacle. It's like, this is just what it is. I'm trying to sit with my pain. I'm trying to accept my pain as a part of me. And that's the work, I guess. That's like, what I can do within the process of making. That's what I can do with a repetition. That's what I can do with looking in a mirror.
Now, very beautiful. I wonder if we should turn it over to questions.
What time is it right now? Oh, great. Okay, yeah. We're going till what?
I don't know.
8?
How long do you want to go?
Well, I'd love to open the conversation a little bit more. I feel like we can dig into some more things and if anyone else is artists and they'd like to get involved, but you want to open it up for questions and we'll just keep talking?
Yeah, sure. Does anyone have a question? Maybe there's a mic that can
Burning questions, burning desires, curiosities.
No? Oh,
Oh.
wow. We answered everything.
How did you decide on the color of the paint skins compared to the metal color?
Well, my color choices are directly chosen in the way that I would as if I was painting with my brush and a mark. And they're there to kind of continue and round out the metal composition itself in the same way that I would a painting when I'm marking it, when I'm choosing it. So you'll see a lot of oranges, you'll see a lot of yellows, a lot of these kind of rusty colors in my work, because I'm very often pulling from the rust part of the metals and then trying to make it a full thing. So that's really where I'm coming from in choosing the colors, is like, how can I bring up these like really subtle greens that I see inside this brown, or this pink that I see inside the black, and then that's I think what happens with the eye when you're looking at it, that it becomes this more blurry thing. And very often the colors of the paint skins, I have this thing that I call like a neon beige. The skins are so muted that when you're looking at them, often your eyes are like a little bit blurry, and it gives them that sense of motion in a way. So that's all, and that has a lot to do with the color choice as well.
Hi.
Hello, Pamela. Amazing artist, Pamela Council here.
Oh, thank you. I'm so grateful to hear both of you speak. And I want to hear more about your ontological commitment to atomism. And what I'm hearing is that for you, a lot of your spiritual technology is grounded in the movement of material and the movement of energy through material. So can you tell us more about that?
Well, I think it's very much more through my body and my relationship to my body and how it's understanding and picking up things. So, I often talk about the possibility of using abstraction or using color as an opportunity for an intuitive tool. Like when I look at something, when I'm looking at these, like they're much more blurry to me in my mind, so I can kind of experience them in their totality. And so the way that I'm experiencing the world is very often through like a movement or a shape or a form, and it's a lot less detailed. It's a lot less like specific. But coming from this fundamental thing of understanding that I'm going back or I'm zooming out and I'm thinking about the cellular state of something or the atomic state of something, it means that the way that I see the world is always through a vibrational quality. So like, I'm gonna put kindness first because I know that I want more of that in the world, and that's gonna come back to me. And that the belief in that is that. And what I believe is my spirituality is my attention. Where I put my attention, things come to life, things come to exist. And that's kind of the process in which I'm moving from.
I know that you've used this line in the past, and I think you call them like point perspective.
Shadow perspectives.
Yeah, there you go. I was wondering how you were thinking about this in this space and how it pertains to the work.
Thank you. So the shadow perspectives came to life in 2017. When I was looking at the shadows behind the work, I was just in my studio and I was thinking about these strange kind of, entities that are living behind the work or within the work, or really the things that we're not looking at when we look at the work. So it really almost became an invisible plane to me. And the impetus for that was that there are no lines in my work. I wanted to bring a line into my work. So I was actually playing with like glass and resin, and I was looking for a clear line, a line that wouldn't necessarily be there and would frame it in some way. And I found Fred Sandbeck's work, and he's such an incredible artist. Basically, he uses yarn, and he'll put one in the top of the ceiling and the other one here. And somehow, when you experience his work, it feels like there's a wall there. How did a wall just come into this place? And so what he's doing is he's playing with proprioception, which is how our brains and our body understand how they are in space, and how our eyes are viewing things and how it's being digested and understood in our mind. So he's an artist that I reference a lot with relationship to the shadow perspective. And it really just became a fun thing that I could do in the room to bring the eyes together, but also really create the idea of the invisible plane, of the things that, we're not necessarily looking at or understanding, or even the way that our minds are tricked to believe something that might not even really be there. And I think that the shadow perspectives kind of elicit that that strange nuance experience of the undefinable in a way.
Thank you. I see that there's some drawings, either accidental or they're starting to be accidental, and then you dove into them within, especially this piece here. Do you want to talk about it? I mean,
Yeah.
I see a dude in there.
Oh, maybe not figurative drawings, but I was spending a lot of time looking at Cy Twombly's work. And Cy Twombly, I mean, such incredible, powerful, and simple work. And I was thinking, I not necessarily intentionally, but I was thinking about the gesture of the pencil and like that movement and like the simplicity of it. And this work it has mass and it has body and it has vigor and it has all of that personality and all of that stuff. And if we're thinking about Chamberlain or we're thinking about these like heavy hitting people working with that, it's really easy to do something that's like, like you feel it, you're sitting with it. And I really was interested in bringing in like this like kind of lightness and this lighter quality to it. And I actually, particularly, it's not even in this show yet, but I love that you're kind of like pulling into that, because I'm really interested in playing with that in my larger work, and like how I can bring these huge pieces into a line, into a drawing,
Yeah, I'd love to see more. It's just starting, and
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah, I mean a lot. It feels like a lot's just starting.
I was asking when in preparation, because this is a lot of material, and to just go straight in and just find metal or start making paint skins. Usually there's some, you talked about the intellectual, but I was wondering if you do a lot of drawing or sketches before you go into a piece.
Never. No, it's been so interesting because I'm doing a lot of outdoor projects. I'm doing a lot of projects with like architects and the city, and they have all this red tape around and all these things that you have to they need drawings. So I'm having to go totally backwards. Like, how do I get to the end of this thing where each and every step was a moment of response, and I'm following that. So how do I go backwards now? So I'm still not drawing. I'm doing a lot of cutouts and cardboard, and like I'm really just building them in different ways. But when I'm entering into a body of work, I'm typically not. I don't know what's going to happen. I can have an idea. I found that big barrel, and I kind of had a feeling that I would break it into a bunch of pieces, but I really don't know until I start. And I think that it's like the uncertainty of it, the discovery of it, the adventure of that, like that's like really what I love to do. But if you look through my notebooks, it's like butterflies and flowers and grids or whatever.
I can see butterflies and flowers, in a very abstract form. You talked about, transmutation, which is definitely involved in both, butterflies and flowers. Um, and I was wondering, so all of these works, you keep mentioning the water barrel. All of these works are coming from that same water barrel.
Yeah, so it started with one piece, and there's actually a sound element as a part of it. My partner, Samuel Kareem, is a composer, and he did the same process as I did. So he basically took one sound that I made while I was working on the metal, and he reverberated that sound through each piece. So they all have like their kind of own harmonic identity. But it was really interesting to see how he took the same process and broke everything into 10 different pieces to kind of continue to articulate their existence in space.
I just wanted to ask you one more question because you didn't go the traditional route, right? Like I went to grad school, and then I'm not going to shout at you. I went to Yale, um, painting and printmaking department. But you came a different route. You kind of came up through your work ethic, through your raw talent, through your network, through your interest of art that just kind of flourished. What advice would you give some of the artists sitting in this room who are maybe considering, maybe they haven't done undergrad, maybe they have done undergrad and are thinking about grad school? Just from a career perspective, do you feel like it's a necessary quality for someone to, go to undergrad, get a degree, go, to grad school to go that route? Or do you feel like, I mean, you're, proof that there's another way. And I think it's just interesting for people to hear that. Because a lot of people just think like, oh, you got to go to Yale to get into this type of, cipher, but it's not true, right?
You do kind of got to go to Yale. No, I'm just kidding. No, I am self-taught. My father is a painter, and I've been painting my whole life. So there was never really like another direction for me. This is what I was gonna do from 12 years old on. So there was never like another option. Um, and that was great. It has been so incredible to be able to move with such purpose in every aspect of my life. And I think that that was the thing that allowed this to happen, was that it was unwavering at any moment. My friendships, my relationships, my lifestyle was all about getting the work done and making it happen and refining it and evolving it. And that's all I wanted to do. That's all I really want to do. And, I think that everyone has a different way of learning. And I think the most important thing is knowing yourself, knowing your highest capabilities and your lowest capabilities, and just being very honest with what and how you're going to do with that. And also just asking for help. Asking people for help is so important. I think, I kind of want to know how many people in here are artists right now? How many are living, working artists? Okay, all right. Arts are here. Do you guys have any particular things that you've been like wondering about in your art career or how you're moving forward as an artist that you want to talk about specifically? If you're open to sharing? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask this question before, and I think it relates to this. When you were talking about Steiner and spirituality, and then also this question, specifically becoming a conduit to this materialization and surrendering to that, and being more content with your own practice, maybe. Um, I guess, was there a specific time in your career or your life, like a revelation or a transition, where you became more comfortable being a conduit to like a higher consciousness, something that you didn't have to put so much pressure on yourself for in your own art practice?
Well, thank you. That's a beautiful question. My mother came from a lineage of Christian Science, and she studied with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And, she was a seeker. She was a woman who was always looking for her okayness and trying to find a way to do that. So I think that that was naturally implemented into me, into understanding source energy, into understanding what I can do with that. And it was never, I started Qigong really young. So I studied with my Sifu when I was 15 years old. So, I was doing energy work. I was moving energy. I was feeling it go through me from the ground and all these things. So it was very clear to me that I didn't have to do anything. All I had to do was listen and move. And then continue to maybe understand that in a deeper way. So I think that from a very young age, like even, I was 19 when I did Wu Wei, and that Taoist perspective was always a part of what I was doing. So I think now, today, I'm feeling a lot more confident of being able to say, I'm just gonna get out of the way, and that when I talk about restraint in the painting, when I talk about having to really hold back, I think that it's a lot of holding myself back. It's a lot of holding my personality back and like letting the things kind of be and show and kind of edit that, That's great. Did someone else raise their hand?
Thanks so much. Kennedy, my name is Naji. I'm really moved by your work in the sense of how you look at it with deconstruction in mind. So if you're talking about your ego and you're talking about being a conduit, can you just speak a little bit more on how you approach that idea of destruction in your ego?
Create and destroy, create and destroy, create and destroy. So as a painter, as an action painter, there was always just that ability to move momentously, and if it doesn't work, I can throw it out. So there's not a lot of things where I'm messing up. I'm not really leaving like space for messing up because it's all just making it and then breaking it and just fucking it up until it's perfect. And the thing that people don't really tell you about sculpture is it's really, really ugly until it's done. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a piece like when it's in the bronze process, but you're just like, what is this? And you really don't, it really reveals itself to you. It really starts to take on all these different like personalities and aspects. And like, I think for me, it's like, I have these relics now as proof to that process. I'm not scared of doing that because I see what comes from it, and as far as like the reductive quality of it, when I first started working with the paint skins, or later in life when I was working with the paint skins, when I went from having these kind of like marbleized skins to monochromatic skin, I was looking at all these artists who were at the end of their life. I was really interested in what people were deciding to do when they knew that they were the last pieces they were going to make. And I was seeing everything was very simple and refined, and like that matureness was coming from, the wisdom came from so much that just became the most pure core part of it. And I'm really looking for the core part of these things and these pieces and of myself. And I think that that's like, it kind of translates in that way. And I'm trying to keep myself from having to edit later. So when I'm starting the piece, I'm starting it simply, and I'm just giving it a little bit here and there, and just really, and that's why time was such a great thing to work with for this thing, because I could really, really allow them to reveal themselves to me, and really submit to that whole process of very little, very little.
So I think you were talking about artists and the starts of their careers and if they would like to share. I think I really connect with you when you talk about spirituality and the confluence of art and science, because my work currently revolves around neuropsychology, Jungian psychology, and architecture. So when was the point in your life, I won't say career, but life, where you were beginning to kind of piece those things together? When was that aha moment, or were there a series of aha moments, and how did you navigate through that?
I think it's right now. I think right now is really the moment. I think that, I've been, when I talk about my life and then I talk about my work, in my mind, they're always just kind of running in parallel to each other. And because my spiritual practice started at such a young age, it was just something that it was a tool to ground me and to keep me healthy and well and able. And now the confluence is happening. Now I'm a woman. Now I'm a grown ass woman, and I'm able to see it. And I was just telling a group earlier today, like the work that I was doing 10 years ago, I'm just now beginning to understand it, and I'm just now beginning to see the relationship of what I was going through and how it's translated into that. And I think that I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want to sound like some woo-woo weirdo, and it really wasn't the right time. I think now is the time. I mean, people are open, people are raw. Like, we just went through some shit. We're going through some shit right now. It's a time for us to recognize our individual liberation and how that affects our collective liberation. And for me, I'm looking inside myself. And now, as I've done that, I'm opening up my world to my brothers and my sisters to try to figure out how we can do that together, and that's the moment for me now. So I've been doing these sculptures. I've been painting for over 15 years, and I'm gonna keep painting. I'm gonna keep making this work for the rest of my life. But I'm really interested in my community and how I can support the legacy of artists and how I can support the research of artists. That's where I want to move my life, and that's where I want to focus my work towards, my brain space.
I think that's a wonderful, thank you, Kennedy. That's a wonderful place to end the conversation. And we could continue to talk after, of course, as we meander, but I would just like to say thank you, Kennedy, and ask everyone in the room to also put their hands together to thank Kennedy for his beautiful work and his talk. Really appreciate it.